The morning began with a gray, muted sky hanging over the city, the kind of chill that seeps through even the thickest coat. On the corner of a busy street, a man sat quietly, his back against a cold brick wall. His clothes were worn thin, his shoes torn at the edges, and his hands cupped together for warmth. Beside him lay a cardboard sign, edges damp from last night's drizzle, with words written in shaky handwriting, "Anything helps." The people passing by moved quickly, their eyes sliding over him as if he were invisible. The sound of footsteps mixed with the hum of engines and the occasional honking of cars filled the air. Despite the noise, there was a kind of silence around him, the quiet isolation that comes from being unseen. The man's name was Daniel. Once, he had a small apartment and a job at a repair shop, but a series of misfortunes, a job loss, a medical bill he couldn't pay, and the rising rent, had slowly stripped away the stability he had built. What remained was a fragile dignity he tried to hold on to each day as he sat in that same spot, hoping for a little help. He often stared at the passing faces, wondering what their lives were like, who they were rushing to meet, what they were thinking, whether they ever stopped to imagine what it might be like to sit where he sat. The city lights glimmered against puddles on the pavement, and though his stomach ached from hunger, Daniel's gaze carried something that hadn't yet died out, a quiet hope. It was faint, but it was there, the belief that something, or someone, might someday change everything. As the morning traffic thickened, a young woman walked by carrying a warm cup of coffee in one hand and a paper bag in the other. Her name was Sarah. She had seen Daniel before on her daily walk to work but had never stopped, always convincing herself she was too busy or that she couldn't make a difference. That day, though, something was different. Maybe it was the tired look in his eyes or the way he tried to smile at people who ignored him, but she slowed down. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure if approaching him would embarrass him or make things awkward. Yet the small voice in her heart pushed her forward. She walked up to Daniel and knelt down so she was at his eye level. The gesture alone startled him, most people avoided looking directly at him. "Hi," she said softly, holding out the coffee. "I thought you might need something warm today." Daniel blinked in surprise, then accepted the cup with trembling hands. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice raspy but sincere. She handed him the paper bag, and as he opened it, the smell of fresh pastries filled the air. The steam rising from the coffee seemed to lift the cold from his fingers. For the first time in days, he felt seen, not as a problem, not as a shadow on the sidewalk, but as a person. They talked for a few minutes. Sarah asked how long he had been out there, and Daniel told her about the job he lost, about how things had spiraled. She listened without judgment, nodding quietly. When she stood to leave, Daniel said, "You didn't have to do this." She smiled and replied, "Maybe not. But everyone deserves kindness." As she walked away, Daniel watched her disappear into the crowd. He held the cup close to his chest, not just for the warmth, but for what it represented, a simple reminder that there was still good in the world. Over the next few days, Sarah kept thinking about him. She began to stop by that same corner every morning, bringing something small, a sandwich, a jacket, or even just a few words of conversation. The more they talked, the more she learned about Daniel's skills and his determination to rebuild his life. He had been a mechanic for almost 10 years before things fell apart. Sarah worked at a small diner nearby, and one afternoon, she spoke to her boss, Mr. Alvarez, about Daniel. The diner was short-staffed, and she asked if he might consider giving Daniel a chance. Mr. Alvarez was hesitant but agreed to meet him. The next morning, Sarah arrived early and found Daniel already awake, sitting on the curb. She told him about the opportunity, and his eyes widened. He couldn't remember the last time someone believed in him enough to recommend him for anything. "You really think he'll take me?" he asked, his voice uncertain. "I think you just need to show him who you are," she replied. They walked together to the diner. The smell of coffee and frying eggs filled the air as Daniel stood nervously near the counter. Mr. Alvarez came out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. After a brief conversation, Daniel was offered a chance to prove himself with a trial shift helping with deliveries and cleaning. The handshake between the two men marked more than a new job, it marked the first step toward reclaiming a life that had slipped away. That day, Sarah watched from the corner of the diner as Daniel worked tirelessly, his face lighting up with every task. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a man defined by what he had lost, but by what he could still give. Months passed, and the season began to change. The gray winter gave way to the soft warmth of spring. Daniel had become a steady part of the diner's team, known for his reliability and kindness. The regular customers greeted him by name, and his laughter could often be heard over the clatter of plates and silverware. He had found a small place to rent, nothing fancy, but it was his, a space where he could sleep without fear, where he could make a cup of coffee in the morning and remind himself how far he had come. Sarah often visited, sometimes sitting at the counter while he worked. They shared stories and dreams, both quietly grateful for how a single moment of compassion had changed the course of their lives. But Daniel never forgot where he came from. On one particular evening, as the sun dipped low behind the buildings, casting a golden glow over the city, he took a walk back to the street corner where it all began. In his hands, he carried a small bag of food and a thermos of coffee. Sitting there on the same patch of concrete was another man, wrapped in an old blanket, looking just as lost as Daniel once had. Without hesitation, Daniel knelt down, just as Sarah had done for him months before. "Hey," he said gently, offering the bag. "You look like you could use something warm." The man looked up, eyes tired and unsure. Daniel smiled and added, "I've been where you are. Things can change, I promise." The man took the food, his expression softening. They talked for a while, the same way Daniel and Sarah once had, two strangers connected by shared humanity. When Daniel stood to leave, the man thanked him, his voice barely above a whisper. Daniel turned back for a moment, watching the fading sunlight spill across the street. He felt something stir inside him, the realization that kindness, once given, never truly ends. It ripples outward, touching lives he might never even know. As he walked away, the city lights began to flicker on, and the noise of evening traffic filled the air. Yet amid all that movement and chaos, there was a stillness, a quiet truth that one act of compassion could start a chain reaction powerful enough to change not just one life, but many.